That's our buddy system. All right, the most time, let's go. Today's daf is Samech Zayin 67. We're picking up on 66b Samech Vav Amud Beis. A lot to do today. We're picking up Pshita. So it's 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 19 lines up from the bottom. Okay, so it says the Gemara Pshita. The Ksav again. Remember again, the question we were dealing with in yesterday's daf was that when the husband gives instructions to the Eidim to go ahead and write the get, is he instructing them to write the get, or is he instructing them to go ahead and sign the get? And both sides, then Afkamina, of course, is do they have the right to outsource the writing of the get to a third party? That's the fundamental shayla. So the Gemara says, Pshita, thank you. Pshita, the Ksav Ageru, the Kasav Ageru. So it's Pashat that when the husband tells him to write the get, he's literally telling him to actually write the get. Diktani say, because if you look at the end of the Mishnah, Rabbi Yossi said, No minu l'shliach. We said to the shliach, remember again that this was Rabbi Chanina Ish Ono came back and reported back from Rabbi Akiva certain halachas, and Rabbi Yossi said we told the shliach af anu mikubalin shafilu amar lebeis and agadah shebishalayim tinu get leishti, that even if a man said to the great high court in Jerusalem to give a get to my wife, sheyilamdu v'yichtavu v'yitnu la, that we teach the beis din to write it and to give it to her. So if you say that when the husband instructs the shaliach to write the get, so writing the get literally means writing the get, then shapir, then I understand why sometimes you'd even have to teach the beis din in Yerushalayim about how to write a get, because lav dafka that they're proficient in writing the get. But if you say that ultimately writing the get just means signing the get, is there a beis din who doesn't know how to sign their names? That would seem preposterous, to which the Gemara says, yes, there is a beis din who does not know how to sign their names. And who is that? Beis din charita, a new beis din. And they have to understand, what does that mean? A new beis din, they don't know how to sign their names? The idea is, remember, signatures, so people a prominent position, dayanim, eidim, so often had to work on having a distinctive signature. Because remember, again, often shtaros simply had to be upheld by others recognizing the signature. So it's possible if you have a new beis din that the dayanim are not used to signing documents. So because of that, they haven't developed a new distinctive signature. So because of that, it could actually mean that we have to teach them to sign. So the Gemara says, the Israel and the Haik Sovu Ksav Yadanhu. And now if you want to say that when the husband tells them to sign, signing actually means their signatures. Ha-kasaf haget kasher. That would mean that when the Eidim go ahead, so that would mean that when the husband says to the Eidim, I want you to write the get, that what he's really telling them is, I want you to sign the get, which means they are empowered to go ahead and commission a sofer to go ahead and write the get. But there's only one problem with that, because we learned yesterday that what? That the halacha follows Rabbi Yossi, that mili lo mimsran. Mili lo mimsran means that what? Words cannot be conveyed. In other words, you could transfer a shlichus to another shaliach. One shaliach could transfer a shlichus, his agency, to another shaliach, as long as what? There's some tangible aspect to the shlichus. But if there's no tangible aspect, then Lamaitza again, shlichus cannot be transferred. So the Gemara says, Amri isvir landik sov ksav yadanhu. No, it's different over here, because if you hold that when the husband says to the Eidim, write the get, that writing means signing, then kasav haget naaseh ke'omer imru. Umod Rabbi Yossi ba'omer imru. So this is actually very interesting. So the Gemara says, as much as we say mili lo mimsran, which means that I could transfer my agency to someone else. A shliach can make another shliach, as long as the shlichus is rooted in something tangible. But if the shlichus is just simply a verbal directive, like in this case, write the get, then Rabbi Yossi holds you can transfer the shlichus. But in this case over here, if you hold that when a husband says to Eidim, write the get, what he's really telling them is what? Sign it, then that is the equivalent of an Omer Imru case. Omer Imru is a case where a husband explicitly says to Eidim, I'm telling you to go tell a sofer to write a get. And even Rabbi Yossi, who says that a verbal shlichus cannot be conveyed from one shliach to another, agrees that where the husband issued explicit instructions to go ahead and appoint a sofer to write the get, that works. So the Gemara says, is that true? That Rabbi Yossi holds that in the case of Omer Imru, that it works. Ksav sofer ve'id kasher. But yet again, we learned that if the sofer wrote the get and the eid signed it, it's kasher. Now, what does that mean? Chasam sofer shaninu. It's not that the sofer just wrote the get; it's that the sofer also signed the get. So you have a get where the sofer wrote it, and the sofer was one of the eidim as well. But Amar Rav Chisda masnisin money. Whose opinion does the Mishnah reflect? Rabbi Yossi the Amar. Mili lo mimsran l'shliach. So this Mishnah reflects the view of Rabbi Yossi holds that words cannot be conveyed, or meaning a verbal shlichus, or a shlichus that is rooted in words, cannot go ahead and be transferred from one shaliach to another. Look at the Mishnah, look at Rashi. Masnisin, the machshir chasimas sofer beget. So the opinion that holds that the signature of a sofer as one of the eidim in the get is Rabbi Yossi. Now watch this. So the Gemara says, now if you hold that Rabbi Yossi holds that Omer Imru works, remember Omer Imru is where the husband says to the shaliach, I want you to go and appoint a sofer to write the get. If you hold that works, then nafik mine churba. You could have a catastrophic circumstance here. How so? Because sometimes the husband will say to two witnesses, tap of samach zayin, because sometimes the husband will say to the sofer, listen, sometimes the husband will say to the eidim, two people, tell the sofer to write the get, uploni v'yichasmu, and say to so and so and so and so. Meaning, again, husband is saying to Reuven and Shimon, I want you guys to oversee the writing of this get. So I want you to hire a sofer, hire Levi the sofer, and I want you to go ahead and get Yisachar and Zvulun to go ahead and sign on the get. And what's going to happen? So this is actually very interesting. We'll discuss this in more depth. Umishum kisufa de sofer chayish umechasmi chad mehanach sahadi v'sofer bahadayu. And what can happen, Abosai? Now the sofer is writing the get. See, and the sofer realizes that the two guys who are commissioning him, neither of them are the eidim. They're going to get other people to be the eidim. The sofer is going to be embarrassed. I'm not good enough to be an aid. Meaning, why can't I be an aid? Why do you have to go out and get additional people? And the two people who were commissioned by the husband, in order not to embarrass the sofer, will tell the sofer to be one of the witnesses with either Yisachar or Zvulun. What's the problem with that? Ubal lo amar hachi. But this was not the husband's instructions. Remember again, both what the Gemara is just pointing out over here is, if you hold that Omer Imru works, just understand that you could get yourself into a lot of trouble. Because essentially, if you're going with the idea that the husband could tell two people to go ahead, to go ahead and tell other people to go ahead and get involved in the process of writing the get, you could get into a situation where things become awkward to the two people in charge of the get process, feel compelled to allow the sofer to be one of the witnesses. That's not what the husband himself had allowed for, and therefore, again, you have essentially a non-kosher get. So the Gemara says, "Kevan da amar mar kosher v'lo sasa can be Yisrael lo shchiach." To which the Gemara says, but since again we learned that as much as a get like this, technically speaking of Omer Imru is kosher, at the end of the day, one should not do this. Therefore, again, it's not shchiach, therefore it's not a common case, and therefore we do not have to be gozer. Take a look at Rashi, top Rashi on the daf. Kevan damar lekaman b'shmaitin gabe imru l'sofer v'yichtov l'ploni or l'ploni v'yichasmu hakasher aget aval lo sasa. Well, so this is actually very interesting. So technically speaking, if a husband says to two people, Reuven and Shimon, here's the deal. I want you to go and engage the sofer, have him write the get, and then I want you to get two other people and have them sign the get. Such a get technically is kosher. It works. But Chazal said don't do it. What were Chazal concerned about? They were concerned that the two people who are overseeing the get may get into an awkward situation with the sofer. When the sofer realizes that he is not being asked to be one of the witnesses, and out of awkwardness may feel compelled to ask the sofer to go ahead and be one of the witnesses along with one of the other two guys, and creates a situation of having someone sign on the get whom the husband did not commission. Therefore, again, technically the get is kosher if the husband said this, but we don't do it. So why don't we be choshish for the following case, where a guy says, a husband says to two people, tell the sofer to write the get, va'atem chasomu, and you guys sign the get, va'azli hanach mishum kisufa the sofer, And maybe again, the two individuals, in order not to embarrass the sofer, will have the sofer sign as one of the witnesses, and one of the two guys will sign along with him. Ubal lo omer hachi, and the husband did not give these instructions. So the Gemara says, Amri hanami kasher v'lo sasahu. True, technically speaking, such a get is kasher, but ultimately, again, Chazal said, don't do it. So we'll say, you see the pattern developing. The pattern developing is that what the Gemara is suggesting, is, at least according to Rabbi Yossi, is that technically speaking, you could have a husband appoint other people to go ahead and appoint other people to do the get. And technically speaking, if you commission a get like this, Chazal said that what? It works. But, what are Chazal asking? Please don't do it. Why not? Because when you start delegating responsibilities, you both say this is a two-tier delegation. You're appointing two people, so husband is delegating two people to oversee the get, and he's asking them to outsource to other people. So I want you to get a sofer, I want you to get two witnesses. So the Gemara just says, the more people you begin to outsource to, the more you run the risk that what? That at some point in time, someone whom the husband did not intend to be one of the Eidim is going to be one of the Eidim. That's our concern over here. And therefore Chazal said, don't do it. Don't outsource this type of stuff. You want to tell two people, you write the get. You want to tell two people, you get the sofer. You want to tell two people, you guys write the get and sign the get, that's fine. But the moment you begin to ask them to outsource to other people, there's a concern that they may come and enlist the help of other people to be Eidim, whom the husband did not have in mind. Therefore, again, Chazal said, try to avoid this situation. So this makes sense according to Mandam, who says that such a get, if you did this, although we don't want you to do it, technically if you did it, it's kosher. However, but according to the opinion who says that not only is such a get kosher, but you're actually permitted to do so, what is there to say? Rabbi Yossi made two statements. Ushmuel savar le kavase bechada, upalagali bechada. Shmuel held like Rabbi Yossi in one case and argued with him in another case. Suppose take a look at Rashi for just a moment. Rashi says, "El Rabbi Yossi tarti amar, el vad Rabbi Yossi tarti amar leposla, bein sha'amar leshlosha tenu, bein sha'amar imru leploni v'ichdov, uploni v'yichasu pasal." So we'll say Rabbi Yossi holds. Rabbi Yossi's shita is that if you said to three people, Tnu get lishtin, remember again, everyone else in the Mishnah said that if you said to three people Tnu, what are you essentially doing? You're making them into a Beis Din, which empowers them to go ahead and hire other people to get the job done. Rabbi Yossi's shita is that a husband tells three people Tnu get lishti, he's telling them, you guys have to take care of it. I want you to write it, I want you to sign it. Similarly, Rabbi Yossi said, and if they delegate it, they get his puzzle. Similarly, Rabbi Yossi said, Omer Imru, even if a husband says to a shaliach, go and tell Ploni to be the sofer, and Ploni to go out and be the dayanim, it does not work. It does not work. I mean, Rabbi Yossi's shita is, when you go ahead and you empower someone to do the get, what you are telling them is, I want you and no one else. Shmuel agrees with Rabbi Yossi in one case and argues with him in another. Take a look at Rashi. Savar like Rabbi Yossi v'chada. The Amar Shmuel halach Rabbi Yossi heicha delo Amar Imru. That the halacha follows Rabbi Yossi when there was no Amar Imru. So meaning, according to that if a husband just says to a group, write the get, what a husband is really saying is what? I want you guys to do it. Upaligale ba Omer Imru. But in the case of Omer Imru, Shmuel will say that if the husband says, go and empower other people, that literally, again, we take the husband at his word, and the group has the ability to go ahead and empower other people. Says the Gemara Gufa, Amar Shmuel, halacha Rabbi Yossi. So we'll say Shmuel said that halacha follows Rabbi Yossi, namely that merely words cannot be conveyed from one shliach to another. We'll say now what that means is the following: that if the shlichus just consists of words and there's nothing tangible to the shlichus, meaning, so like in this case, write a get for my wife. Right? So we'll say, so that shlichus, it will produce something tangible, a get, but right now it's not anchored in anything tangible, as opposed to watch my computer. Can you watch my computer? So we'll say, so watch my computer is a tangible shlichus, because again, it's a tangible agency, because you have to watch a computer. So Shmuel said that halacha follows Rabbi Yossi, that an agency cannot be transferred when all it is a verbal directive, when there's nothing tangible. Amar lefanu Rabbi Shimon Berebi. Listen to this. I will say. So Rabbi Shimon Berebi said to Shmuel. So me'achar Rabbi Meir v'Chanina ish ono cholkin al Rabbi Yossi. Ma ra'a Rebbe lomar halach Rabbi Yossi. So we'll say. So here, this is fascinating. So Rabbi Shimon said, "I don't understand, Rebbe. You just said that halacha follows Rabbi Yossi, but if you look in the Mishnah, Rabbi Yossi is outnumbered. Rabbi Yossi is outnumbered because we'll say you've got Rabbi Meir, and also you have Rabbi Chanina ish ono, and you also have Rabbi Akiva, all arguing on Rabbi Yossi, namely that mili mimsaran, that a shlichus can be transferred, that a verbal agency absolutely can be transferred to another shaliach. So if Rabbi Yossi is so outnumbered, why would you say that the halacha follows him? But it's amazing. So what does Shmuel respond? Amarlo, shtok b'ni shtok. Be quiet, my son, be quiet. Lo ra'isa es Rabbi Yossi. You have never seen Rabbi Yossi. Il mole ra'iso nimuko imo. If you would see Rabbi Yossi, you would see how sharp he is, and you would understand that because of that, pretty much wherever Rabbi Yossi speaks up, the halacha always follows him. Now the Gemara digresses for just a moment to speak about the greatness of some of the Tanams. So listen to this. Tesanya, Isi ben Yehuda hayamona shvachan shel chachamim. But say Isi ben Yehuda used to discuss the praise of the various chachamim. It's actually a very beautiful Gemara. Rabbi Meir, Chacham v'Sofer. Rabbi Meir is someone who's a scholar and a scribe. So we'll say again, the way the Maharsha understands this, Chacham v'Sofer is someone ultimately again who's wise and is also able to transmit. Just like the Sofer ultimately again is someone who writes Svarim to be able to use for others. See, because we'll say, not every Talmid Chacham is able to transmit Torah. Just because you have the knowledge doesn't mean you can teach. So Rabbi Meir was a Chacham and a Sofer. Rabbi Yehuda, this is amazing. Chacham l'chishiyirtzeh. Rabbi Yehuda was wise when he wanted to be. I will say, now what does that mean? Take a look at Rashi. Chacham l'chishiyirtzeh. Get ready for this. This is actually an amazing idea. Rashi says, Chacham l'chishiyirtzeh kishayarotze lihios masun u'misyashe b'dvar hayachacham. When he chose to be exact, masun means measured, u'misyashe. Misyashe really means precise with his words. He was a chacham. We'll say, which is fascinating. So when he chose to be wise and measured with his words, he was, which seems to infer that what? That, and if he chose not to, he wasn't, which we'll say is an incredible praise, because what it's saying is, to be wise requires active decision to be measured with how you talk and how you conduct yourself. Rabbi Tarfon, Gal Shalagozim. Rabbi Tarfon was a pile of nuts. They will say, now this is a compliment. Right? So Rashi points out over here, Gal Shalagozim, Rashi says, is that, again, whenever someone asked him a question, he always had a different answer. From a Gemara, from a Mishnah, from a Medrash, from a Pasuk. Just like a pile of nuts, there's a whole bunch of them. He always had something else at his disposal. Rabbi Shmuel, Chanus Miuzenes. Rabbi Shmuel was like a well-stocked store. Now what does it mean? Look at Rashi. Chanus Miuzenes. Yena Muchan Batamid. A store that always has wine. Sheina chen v'nitzarech lomar l'lekuchin hemtinu v'avi lachem. Kach nitzarech adam lilmod mipiv mezuman lo v'tamud var perus. We'll say, so just like, there are different kinds of stores. So there's some stores you walk in, and you say to the proprietor, I'd like X, and the proprietor says, oh, no problem, I've got that, but it's in the back. Give me a second, then I'll get it. And there's another type of store where what you need is right on the shelf. So Rabbi Shmuel was like the store where what you needed was on the shelf. Meaning that not only did he have the Torah, but whatever you needed from him, he had it right on the tip of his tongue. He was ready to go. I mean, just a sharpness in his learning and understanding. Rabbi Akiva, Otsar Balum. Rabbi Akiva was a storehouse. Literally means, Balum means with compartments. Look at Rashi, Otsar Balum. Rashi's Kach Meforsh Bavus Rabbi Nassan. Lama Hayar Rabbi Akiva. Lama Hayar Rabbi Akiva Dome. La'ani Shenata Kupasa V'Yatza L'Sad. This is actually quite beautiful. Rabbi Akiva was like a pauper who goes out into the field, right, to collect laket shicha peah. Goes out with his basket. Matzah Sorim Katzar V'Nasan Ba. Matzah Chitin Nasan Ba. V'chein Pulim V'chein Adashin. So what does the pauper do? The pauper, when he goes out to the field, takes whatever is available. And then what happens? V'chein Adashin Kshabala Beso. Birer kol min umin latzmo. So when the pauper is out in the field, so he takes in everything. And then when he gets home, he sorts out, here's the wheat, here's the barley, here's the legumes. Listen to how beautiful. Kach Rabbi Akiva, kishalaman mirabosav, shaman davar mikra mirabosav, va'acharav halacha, va'acharav medrash, va'acharav agada. When Rabbi Akiva learned Torah, so he heard a medrash or a mishnah or a pasuk, he just took in everything. He took in everything. And what happens? Therefore, va'acharav, nasan libo lachzra leid, ulagarsan, ad shahayu sidurin befiv, v'lo amar, and Rabbi said, then what would he do? After he got all of this knowledge, then he organized the knowledge like into different knowledge silos. V'lo amar elmod mikra la'atzmo u'medrash la'atzmo. Aval kishena'aseh chacham gadol asa kol Torah matbeos. See the medrash Shabbos says. Listen to this. So the Gemara says instead of saying, see, one would have thought that like a methodical approach to learning would be, I'm going to start with Chumash. Then after Chumash, I'm going to go to Mishnah. I'm going to go to Halacha. I'm going to go to Gemara. Shabbos say, of course, again, there's a lot of logic to that as well. That's not what Rabbi Akiva did. Rabbi Akiva just took in everything, and then afterwards, he went ahead and he organized that knowledge according to subject matter. Shabbos also, by the way, has to do with the fact that Rabbi Akiva, remember, gets a little bit of a later start in life, right? Rabbi Akiva, remember, is not being exposed to Torah as a child in a methodical fashion. He's already well into his adult life, and so he gets into the base medrash, and he's literally like a kid in a candy store who mamish just wants it all. So he assimilates it all, just like the ani gets everything in the basket and then arranges it after. It's quite beautiful. Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, kupas harochlim. Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, Kupas Arochlim, Rashi says over here, Kupas Arochlim, Mefare Shasam Arochel Zeh Shebal Le'ir. So a rochel is like a perfumer. Like a perfumer. So just like the perfume person comes to the city, he has all different types of perfumes. So too, again, when you ask Rabbi Yochanan, and when the perfumer would show up to the city, do you have this kind of perfume, that kind of perfume, whatever you would ask Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, something in Chumash, something in Medrash, something in Mishnah, he would have the answer. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, Kupa Shalusamim. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah was literally like a kupa, like a salesman, or literally like baskets of besamim. Rashi points out, what's the chilik between rochlim and besamim? So apparently, the perfumers would have all of their wares, but unpackaged. So you would ask the perfumer, give me some of this, and he would package it up for you right there. The kupa shel besamim had prepackaged spices. So apparently the difference over is that Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, his knowledge was packaged and ready to be disseminated immediately. Mishnas Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov kav v'naki. The Mishnah of Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov also was kav. Kav v'naki means, Rashi says, lo limeid harbe kishar chaverov. Elamash omer veis hamedrash naki ushalachim osilam. This is amazing. Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov apparently was not the greatest Talmid Chacham, meaning there were others who had more knowledge than him. But what he knew was sharp. Therefore, whenever Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov is quoted in the Gemara, the halacha always follows Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov. It's an incredible musar that sometimes it's not how much you know, but it's the clarity of what you know. So Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov didn't have the greatest amount of knowledge, but what he did know was clearer and sharper than all of his colleagues. Amazing. Rabbi Yossi, Nimuka Oma. Rabbi Yossi, his logic was always with him. Which I will say, again, remember, is how he got into this Gemara over here to begin with. That's why, again, Rabbi's saying, the halacha follows Rabbi Yossi, even though what? Even though he's outnumbered by his fellow rabbinic colleagues. Rabbi Shimon, tochein harbi umotzi kima. Literally, he grinds a lot, and motzi, and lets go of a little. Now, what does that mean? The Gemara says, Tana, mishkach kima. Rabbi Shimon grinds, that means he absorbed incredible amounts of knowledge, and only forgot very little. Umasha motzi, eino motzi elasubin. And that which he forgot wasn't that important anyway. Literally, that which he forgot was like the bran, which Avosai means, what did he forget? He forgot the statements that they were not halacha l'maisa. In other words, that everybody forgets something, but what he did forget was never halacha l'maisa, it was the subin, the bran, the unnecessary things. V'chein amar Reb Shimon l'talmidav, so Reb Shimon said to his students, Banai, shanu midosai, learn my lessons, meaning learn from me, shemidosai chirumos mitrumos midos of Rabbi Akiva. Because ultimately, again, my teachings are literally like the cream of the teachings of Rabbi Akiva. All right, so it's just a little bit of an insight into the greatness of our Tanam. So Gufa, the Gemara goes back. Amar l'shnayim. If a husband said to two witnesses, Imru the sofer v'yichtov u'leploni v'yichasmu. Say to the sofer to go ahead and write the get, and say to so and so and so. Excuse me, that they should go ahead. And sign the get. So we'll say, so in this case over here, remember, we've got a husband saying to two people, I don't want you to write or sign. What I want you to do is choreograph the process. So I want you to go and engage a sofer and engage two witnesses to sign. And what happens? So Rav Huna said in the name of Rav, such a get is kosher, meaning that process works, but don't do it. If it's kosher, why can't I do it? Meaning, so I don't understand. You just told me that it works. If it works, why can't it be done? We're worried that the wife may hear about this process and she may hire her own witnesses. She may hire witnesses to go ahead and sign and write the get. Shabbos, meaning, in other words, what the Gemara is saying over here is once you're outsourcing stuff, you go ahead and you open up the possibility of some type of fraudulent get. So if the process is not going fast enough for the wife, maybe she'll go ahead and she'll hire her own witnesses. Meaning once the husband's outsourcing, remember again, once there's outsourcing, so what that means is the people who are going to sign and write from the get, remember, are not hearing this information directly from who? From the husband himself. They're hearing it from two people who were appointed by the husband. Once you're opening up that possibility, remember, up until now, get has always been a tightly held process. Meaning we've always assumed that because it has to be driven by the husband, we don't want anyone doing anything without the directive of the husband. Now what you're telling me is that technically speaking, when a husband says to two guys, I want you guys to oversee the process, technically it works. But don't do it. But if it works, why can't I do it? Because once you're taking the process away from the husband, there's the possibility that maybe the woman will hire her own witnesses, in order to get moving a little bit faster. But are we really choshesh for that? We learned, but we learned, if that's the case, that you're always concerned for fraudulent witnesses, then you're going to have to call the authenticity of every single signed document into question, right? So if there's a land purchase and there's a get that goes out and there's a document that has two witnesses on it, how do you know someone didn't hire witnesses to go ahead and sign on that document? We're not choshesh for that. That's halacha. If you bring the document to Beis Din and we're able to verify that the signatures are really the people who signed on it, then the get is kosher. We're not choshesh that people go ahead and hire other people to do things. To which the Gemara says, no, here's the difference. Maisalo Abdi. In this case, Shabbosai, remember again, when the woman hires these people, so the maisa again, the act of hiring them is not a maisa. Dibura ka'amri. Ultimately, again, all that would happen over here is a fraudulent dibur. Then these people, remember, the people who the woman would hire think they're actually being hired by the husband. Right now, lav dafka, the woman's going to be one who's doing the hiring. She might just choreograph this process. So there's no so the idea over here is the only fraudulent thing that's happening is a dibur. And what the Gemara is saying is, we make the assumption that people don't engage in fraudulent actions. But we absolutely assume that what? That people engage in fraudulent speech. So to go ahead and engage witnesses to do something illegal, so people do. The witnesses, of course, have absolutely no idea that they're being engaged in something illicit. Because remember, once you set up the process, that witnesses for the get could be engaged by people other than the husband himself, then Lamaisa, essentially the Gemara is saying is you're opening up yourself to the possibility that someone other than the husband could illegally hire witnesses to sign on a get, and the witnesses just think that they're doing the right thing. They don't realize that they're being engaged in illegal activity. Similarly, again, the Gemara says that if you go ahead, fine. So, I'm sorry, I just lost the place. If a man says to two people, tell the sofer to go ahead and write the get, and I want the two of you to be witnesses. Rav Chisda Amar Kasher v'lo Sasa. Rav Chisda said it's kosher, but don't do it. So again, remember, understand what's the pattern here. The pattern here, what we're saying to the husband is, please, appoint the necessary parties yourself. If you didn't, now again remember, technically speaking, if a husband empowers someone else to hire the parties who are going to go ahead and write the get and sign the get, is the get kosher? Yes. Technically it works. But we're saying, please don't do it. Because we want everyone involved to the get to be appointed directly by the husband, because otherwise you open up the possibility for difficulty. Sirab Abrachana Amar Kasher V'Sasa. Sirab Abrachana says, no, this last case is okay, because in this last case, what's happening? Husband is saying to two people, listen, you guys engage the sofer, but I want the two of you to be the witnesses. So Rab Abrachana says, in that case, I'm fine with that case. Because here, to outsource to a sofer, that's fine. That's fine. As long as what? You're not outsourcing edus. As long as the edus is being appointed by the husband himself, we are fine with outsourcing safros. Rav Nachman Amar Kasher v'lo sasa. Rav Nachman says it's kasher if you don't do it. Rav Sheshes Amar Kasher v'sasa. Rav Sheshes says it's kasher and you can do it. Rabba Amar Kasher v'lo sasa. Rabba says it's kasher, you shouldn't do it. Rav Yosef Amar Kasher v'sasa. Rav says it's kasher, you could do it. V'ika da'amri. V'ika da'aflachlu. And some reverse all of these names. Right? Rashi says actually some reverse Rabba and Rabbi Yosef. Both say, so bottom line, halacha l'maisa, the way we paskin, the Rabban paskins, Shulchan Aruch paskins, that in this kind of case, the way we paskin, if the husband said to two people, you could go, I want you guys to go ahead and hire the sofer, and appoint two other people as edim. Technically speaking, such a get is kosher, v'lo sasakim. But the way we paskin is we do not like that. Because ideally the way we want to set up the get process is how? That ultimately we want everyone involved to be appointed directly by the husband. We want the sofer to be appointed by the husband, we want the edim to be appointed by the husband, and ideally we do not want any third parties involved with the hiring of edim or the sofer. Says the Gemara, Amar la'asar kisvu get. So remember again, the Mishnah spoke about a case where a man says to 10 people, write a get for my wife. Tan Rabbanon, Amar la'asar kisu get utinu li'ishti. If a man said to 10 people, write a get and give it to my wife. So what's the halacha? Echad kosev al yidei kulam. So one writes on behalf of the group. Right? So meaning we'll say one writes on behalf of the group, and halacha l'mais again, because fine. However, kulcham kisvu. But if he says to a group of 10 people, kulcham, I want all of you to write the get, then what? So we'll say, obviously that's not literal, because you can't have 10 people write the get. So what does it mean? Echad kosei b'ma'amad kulam. One person writes it, but he has to do it in the presence of everyone else. Holichu get le'ishti. If a man says to a group of people, I want you guys to go ahead and take the get to my wife, echad molech ayedei kulam. So one person from the group takes it on behalf of everyone else. Kulchem holichu. What if he says, I want all of you to go ahead and take the get to my wife? Then echad molech b'ma'amad kulam. Then one of them takes it in the presence of everyone else. In other words, everyone else must be present. So one person is the actual shliach laholacha. He's the actual agent who transports it, but it must take place in the presence of everyone else. Ibayluhu. Manu osan mahu. This is an interesting case. What happens, if you look at Rashi, Rashi says, Manu mahu, imlo amar kulchem, aval mina'an aleph beis gimel dalid, va'amar kisfu get le'ishti mahu. So we'll say, listen to this. So let's say in this case over here, husband doesn't say kulchem. Instead he says there's a group of 10 people. He says 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Kisu get le'ishti. Right? So we'll say, so what is that? Is that a case of kulchem? Is that a case of all of you? Or in which case everyone has to participate somehow in the get? Or is that just the case ultimately of not kulchem? So the Gemara says, Manu mahu. So the Gemara says, Manu also mahu. Rav Huna Amar, Mana Eino Kulchem. So Rav Huna said that Mana, if you're just counting people off, that is not the equivalent of saying Kulchem, all of you. Rabbi Yochanan Mishum Rebbe Lazar de Min Roma Amar. So Rabbi Yochanan, the name Rebbe Lazar, Roma means literally Rome. From Rome said, Mana Hariyuki Kulchem. That ultimately when you count off people, that's the equivalent of what? Of saying all of you. Amar Rapapa v'lo pligi. Rapapa said they're not arguing. Hadamana kulhu v'hadamana miksasaihu. It depends. Did he count off the entire group, or did he only count off part of the group? So we'll say, so which one is which? Amri leila haigisa v'amri leila haigisa. So we'll say, so again, different opinions had different versions as to the way this all fits together. Look at Rashi for just a moment. Amri leila haigisa. So some say it goes in this direction. Manakulu, that if the husband counted all of the people in the group, then what? Akulhu kapid. Then that means if he counts all of them, that's like saying kulchem. But mana miksasayu, if he only counts some of them, then that's not like kulchem. Look at the next Rashi. V'amri leila haigisa. Others say the opposite. Mana miksasan gali daiti da'ahani kapid v'tzrichin kulan hamenuyan lachtom. Manakulan kivan delo amar kulchem lo hikbid. Others say that Rabbi say if he began to count them up but didn't count the whole group, he expressed his intent that he wants the whole group. But if he counted the whole group but didn't say kulchem, then it means he doesn't want the whole group. So in other words, it's a machlokes how to exactly understand his intentions when he just counts up and doesn't say kulchem. Therefore, as a result, iskin Rabbi Yehuda begita de kulchem. Therefore, I will say Rabbi Yehuda instituted. Now, this is an interesting lashon over here. Rabbi Yehuda instituted in a get of kulchem. Now, look at Rashi. Iskin Rabbi Yehuda begita de kulchem. Beget sha'adam omer b'ma'amad rabim. Yesh lochush shema yomer lekulchem ikavod. V'lo yichasu kulchem. So let's listen to this. So Rabbi Yehuda therefore instituted that whenever a husband is giving a directive to write the get to a group of people, but the husband, we're not clear about what the husband said. Did he say kulchem? Did he not say kulchem? But it's a situation where the husband could have said kulchem. We write in a very specific text into the get. And what's the text? Ksovu, in the get we actually write that the husband says, Ksovu, I want you to write the get, o kulchon, o kolchad v'chad minchon. If all of you want to do it, you could all do it. Now remember, all of you means if all of you want to be present for the writing while one of you does it, that's fine. Or if only one of you wants to be present when the writing is being done, it's fine. Chasomu, when you sign it, o kulchen, o trei minchon, all of you could sign, or just two of you could sign. O vilu, when you transport the get, o kulchen, o kolchad v'chad minchon, all of you could do it, or one of you can do it. And I will say again, so what is Rabbi Yehuda trying to accomplish? Rabbi Yehuda was trying to write in a disclaimer almost. So again, whenever this was dafka done, whenever the directive to write or take care of the get was given to a group, and we're not exactly sure what the husband did say, what the husband didn't say, we would make the husband explicitly write into the get what? That essentially, if the whole group wants to do it, that's fine, but I also empower any one of them to write it, any two of them to sign it, and any one of them to deliver it. Comes along Rava, Amar Rava zinin the guys like diburei va'amar kolchon v'lo amar kol chad v'chad minchon va'aslif sulei. But listen to this. Rava says, the basic, the problem. I don't know if this is true in a legal sense, but at least from a Talmudic sense, we generally assume the more verbose a contract or a document, the more room you leave for ambiguity and for mistakes. I think normally conventional wisdom is the opposite. The more verbose is, the more you could spell out everything. What Rav is concerned about is, the more verbose you make it, the problem is, if you leave off something, then what? The omission, you could infer something from the omission. So Rav says, Rabbi Yehuda, you're saying essentially, in a get that you say to a group, you gotta say, all of you are one of you, all of you are two of you, all of you are one of you. And what happens if somebody leaves off one of those phrases? Then what? You've messed up everything. Therefore, Rava says, I have a different suggestion. Ela amar Rava, ksovu kolchad minchon. Rather, here's the text. In a get, you're right. This is only when the husband is giving his directive to a group. So, in terms of who's going to write it, any one of you could write it. Chasomu, signing it, kol trei minchon. Any two of you. Ovilu kol chad minchon, giving it any one of you. In other words, you could lop off the first part. You could take off the kulchun. All you need to write in there is, my instructions are, any one of you could write it, any two of you could sign it, any one of you could deliver it. If you truncate the words like that, if you limit the words like that, hopefully again, you also heighten the probability that people will write the right text. Hadrun Allah ha'omer. Let's begin the new parak. Plenty of time. We've got 4 minutes. Says the Mishnah. Mi sha'achzu is actually a fascinating gemara. Mi sha'achzu karadaikus. If somebody was seized by karadaikus. What's karadaikus? Says Rashi. Shem shida. Hasholetes kishashosa yayin harbe megito. This is the name of the shade, the name of the demon, that takes possession of someone when they drink too much fresh wine. So we'll say, so the next time you drink a little too much, right? It's not me, it's karadaikus, right? So this is interesting. Now, remember, understand that from Chazal's perspective, so only aged wine was quality wine. In other words, that if you drank wine right from the press, that was considered to be an inferior wine. So apparently, if a person drinks too much wine right off the press, so ultimately, again, there's an issue with the shade karadaikus. So if someone was seized by karadaikus, va'amar kesu get leishni, and in this state of being seized, and I will say, we'll explain what all of these things mean. And in this state, he says, go ahead and write a get for my wife, lo amar klum. Such a statement ultimately is meaningless. Because Rabbi say again, the assumption is he lacks capacity. He lacks capacity. Amar kisu get liishti va'achzu kardaikus. What happens if a person was lucid and he said in his state of lucidity, he says, write a get for my wife, and then he was seized by kardaikus. The chazav amar lo tichtavenu, and in his state of being seized by kardaikus, he says, no, I don't want you to write the get. Then what's the halacha? Ein devarav hachronim klum. His last statement is meaningless because I will say again, the last statement was issued while under the influence of kardaikus. And therefore, again, the statement is meaningless. Nishtatek, if a person will say became a mute. Became a mute. Now, normally, again, this can mean a deaf mute, or just we'll discuss what it means. Va'amrulo, nichtov get li'ishtechas. So that's right now, he just can't communicate. Rashi says this is machmas choli, as a result of sickness. So what happens? And we say to him, do you want us to write a get for your wife? And obviously, this is not like, we don't just stamp, want to get, this is not like, obviously, there are circumstances here that ultimately, again, precipitated this conversation. So he said, do you want us to try to get for your wife? And he nodded his head, yes. So both say, so what do we say to the nod? So both can also shlosha pamim. So both say, we do a nod test. In other words, we ask him a series of questions. And actually we'll see again, both say, we ask him a series of 6 questions. Im amra alav lav va'al hein hein, hare elu yichtavu b'yitnu. We ask him 6 questions, both say, that by the way, have nothing to do with Gittin, but just to really test for if he's lucid or not. All right, so really, literally like three yes questions, 3 no questions. We'll see, and if he scores a perfect 100%, then the Maisik in that attests to his lucidity, and therefore we give the get. Says the Gemara, my kardaikos. What is kardaikos? Amar Shmuel, the nachse chamra charata. It's someone literally who is, the literal lush nachse means is bitten. Someone who is bitten by new wine that comes off the wine press. In other words, someone who drinks too much fresh wine. I don't know if the right word is fresh wine, but the idea is someone who drinks, I guess it's unaged wine off the wine press. Right? Grape juice, right. Someone who drinks too much unaged wine off the wine press. Ultimately, again, that's kardaikos. I listening. Mi shanashcha yayin chadash. So the Gemara says, why are you bringing shadim into this? Why don't you just talk about that? This is someone who's ill, literally because he drank too much wine off the wine press. I just want to point out, this is not drunk. This is not inebriation. That's not what he's referring to over here. This is literally referring to that person got sick. A person was literally sick because of this. And apparently, not just physically sick, I guess apparently it does something that clouds your judgment as well. So the Gemara says, because remember, because drunk is obvious. If a person is a shikker, then of course a person lacks capacity. I don't need a Mishnah to teach that. That's a general din in halakha that you don't have capacity when you're drunk. So the Gemara says, Hakamash Malon, Daha Rucha Karadaikus Shema. So I'll say this is important because what the Mishnah is telling me is that there is a shade. There's a particular demon. Now again, we're gonna get heavy into shadim. We're gonna discuss shadim extensively over the next couple of days. But the Mishnah is also telling me that there is a shade. I'm sorry? Make stronger coffee, absolutely, for the shade. Right? There is a shade that is associated with the consumption of wine off the wine press, and that shade's name is karadaikos. Lamai nafkamina. What does it matter ultimately for us, the name of the shade? Lekemia. We'll say, because again, one of the ways, and we'll discuss this, that they used to deal with shadim was a kamiya, an amulet. In order for an amulet to work, in order for the kamiya to work, you had to know the name of the particular shade. Samaya Suse. So we'll say, what is the cure? What is the cure, by the way? If a person literally drank too much wine, ultimately again from the wine press. So what is the remedy? What is the remedy for this illness? What is the remedy for karadaikos? Bisra sumka admuri. You have to eat lean meat that is roasted over coals. V'chamra marka. Right? And ultimately, again, chamra marka means watered down wine. So lean meat, so grilled lean meat with watered down wine. Amar Abaye, so Abaye said, Amr li'aim. Well, so now we're going to speak about some remedies. Now, this is also interesting. There's a much bigger discussion which we'll get into. Amr li'aim, my mother told me, l'shimsha bas yom. Rabbi says shimsha. Rashi says over here, choli sha'achzu machmas chom bo bayom. Heat stroke. Someone who's suffering from heat stroke. On the first day, the remedy is kuza demaya, cup of water. In other words, hydration. hydrate yourself. Right? If the heat stroke is lasting 1 day, drink a lot. Bas Yomi, if the heat stroke lasts 2 days, so sakuri, bloodletting. We're going to say bloodletting was an answer to many things. We'll also see that, remember, Chazal's knowledge of medicine was not based on anything Torah specific. We're going to see that Chazal's knowledge of medicine was based on the general understanding of medicine. So bloodletting was a very common cure for many different things. Bas tlasa yomi, if ultimately again the heat stroke lasts 3 days, then again we're going to see this is a favorite cure. Bistro sumka agmuri, v'chamra marka, ultimately again take the lean meat, roast it over coals, and water down wine. L'shimsha, no, you know what? Actually, we're going to stop over here. L'shimsha tika for older heat stroke. All right, I think tomorrow we're going to start at 5:45, maybe 5:30. We'll start. We'll start at 5:45 tomorrow.